Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co-host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week we're going to talk about pandering in gacha games, how it goes well, how it backfires, so on and so forth. Just to kind of, I guess, set some clarifications and some definitions early on. When we're referring to pandering, the most obvious thing to talk about would be like fan service or so on and so forth. But we do recognize that there are other ways that game developers, game creators can pander to their audience, be it, appealing to national pride, appealing to, other ideals and so forth. But for the purposes of this conversation, just to kind of try and keep it as clean as possible, we're probably going to be primarily focused on fan service as a subgenre of pandering. Just do recognize that we are aware that there are other forms of pandering, and they're just not going to be the primary focus of this sort of conversation. So, with that sort of disclaimer out of the way, um, Dave, when I first pitched this topic, did you have any initial thoughts, concerns, whatever? Or,
Well, yeah, like Steve, like you mentioned, yeah, try and keep it a little more on the lighthearted side, the for fun side here. But yeah, when you first threw the idea here of pandering, there were two instances in relatively recent memory that jumped out to me of this occurring, and we can kind of go down the bunny trails because they've happened recent enough that I think a lot of players that played gotcha games are familiar with them happening, and they're also enough in the past that we can kind of see some of the positive or negative repercussions of them of the developed pandering. And so the two instances that immediately jumped to my mind when you brought this up was it's a meme, the snowbreak
yeah.
route, right? So that was one thing that popped up to me there. And then the other one that popped up in my mind was Brown Dust 2, how they, after a number of like player surveys and satisfaction surveys, they said we are no longer going to bring male characters into the game. We're only going to be bringing female characters over because for Brown Dust 2, there's the original Brown Dust, formerly or it was Brave. It was Brown Dust. They changed it to Brave 9, and then somehow we still have Brown Dust 2. Anyway, naming confusions aside, in the original Brave 9, there's a huge roster of characters, male and female. Now the female to male ratio is greater, yes,
Mhm.
but the disparity when we're talking about female to male characters in Brown Dust 2 is greater. And when Brown Dust 2 initially launched, they were bringing over some of the male characters from the original game. But then I want to say it was maybe a year ago at this point, they said we're no longer bringing in male characters. And it's just been female characters ever since then. And so that's just kind of fill those in that maybe aren't familiar with that particular one, since Brown Dust 2 is maybe a um, smaller gaming audience. It's slightly more niche combat in terms of being like a more of a strategy turn-based thing. But then to go back to the first instance, just to elaborate on that real quick with Snowbreak, yeah, again, this is probably one that most people that are in the gotcha world are familiar with in terms of going the Snowbreak route. So this is kind of the introduction of various interactions and the introduction in the base of like giving some of the girls massages and the artistic style. They went with new skin, and I think there was even they changed the description in the Steam client to, instead of being like a sci-fi shooter, now it's a wipe shooter. Like they even
Mhm.
changed some of the verbiage to basically say, we know what you want, we're gonna give it to you, here it is. So those are the two that originally stood out to me. And so, Steve, starting with those two instances, and then we can go to any other things that you want to
Mhm.
talk about here. But in those two instances, first of all, I guess in your timeline of playing those games, because I know you've dabbled in them
Mhm.
at least a little bit, were you changing them pre-Pander, and have you tried them post-Pander?
So, I'm going to start with Brown Dust. Brown Dust, I played pre and post Pander, I guess. So I played it before and after the changes. I'm going to be honest, I actually forgot You reminded me before the episode, but when I first suggested this as an episode topic, um, I actually had forgotten that Brown Dust had too had made that sort of promise that they had said, "Hey, we're not bringing any more male characters over." I mean, obviously from playing the game, I recognized, hey, why aren't there any more of the demon lords? And there were a number of very prominent male characters um, in Brown Dust that just weren't being moved over, and I kind of went, okay, whatever. I'm not like I figure that maybe one or two of them will get thrown in eventually, but I didn't really think about it all that much, if I'm being 100% honest, because again, that roster was so large, and the other thing is that because they had already moved some male characters over, it was one of those. I'm like, okay, they'll just cycle through eventually, and again, the ratios were rather skewed against men anyway, so whatever. No big deal. I think the other part of it was, I want to say last year's summer event, they released some male character skins. So that was the other reason why I just kind of went, okay, well, I didn't think about it all that much. But regardless, yeah, I can understand why they did it just from, sort of a business point of view, and I'll circle back to that thought maybe later. But as far as that game goes, I'll be honest, I'm a little disappointed that they did it because again, they did have some rather interesting and cool characters in Brown Dust that were male, and I would have liked to have seen them updated and brought into the new engine, new game. Um, you know, I- it is a little bit of a oh, that sucks, but okay, fine, I understand it. Especially with the direction the game has gone. I
And
understand it.
I think, and I may be wrong in this, I may be misremembering this, but I even think that part of this decision too is not only based off that, but the animator who does the cutscenes, I think just explicitly said, I like drawing female characters cutscenes. I don't enjoy drawing male characters
That
cutscenes.
yeah, that we're
I
gonna
may
put
be
a
wrong
pin
on
into
that, but
that.
for some reason that's in my memory as if he had said that or I read that somewhere. But to be fair, I could be misremembering again,
See,
or it could be somebody just trolling with the translation since I believe it is he is speaking Korean.
you're trying to skip ahead to one of my future tangents that I'm trying to hold
Oh,
off on.
okay. Who
But
knew?
thank you. You've
Who
given
knew?
me ammo for my future tangent. Anyway, and then there's Snowbreak, who I only played after, because I really hadn't been interested in. I'm not a big shooter player, so I wasn't really interested in the game anyways. I primarily jumped into, I think it was during one of the anniversaries that it was having, the most recent anniversary that they had. I jumped in for that, just kind of because that's usually the best time to get in if it's a game that you didn't play since launch. They'll be very generous during those periods. So jumped in during that, and it was okay. I'm not going to say one way or the other. I don't think that the gameplay was something that really stuck with me, anyways. And the massage games and so on and so forth weren't anything that I was overly excited about. I guess there wasn't anything there that, for lack of a better term, titillated me enough to make it worth the time that it would take for me to log in and advance the story and characters and get all the materials and so on, and build a team and so on. Just uh, juice wasn't worth the squeeze, as it were.
Well,
Uh,
I think for those two, and the reason I want to highlight those two
mhm.
is yes, I still play Brown Dust 2, and I've just recently picked Snowbreak back up just because I was kind of bored. I'd cleared out my roster, and I was like, well, let's go back and check in on Snowbreak. That they just had that big major update the other week. So I point these out because I think in terms of pandering and looking at the bigger picture of developers that pander to their player base, I think these two are kind of they do it right and they do it in a way that's just, they know exactly kind of who their player base is and then they lean into that. And like Snowbreak or not Snowbreak, Brown does too. Even going a step with developers in terms of they they goofily dress up as characters from their
Mhm.
games and some of their live streams and just have fun with it like that. And just like the way they advertise some of their merchandise in the live streams or maybe place some of the merchandise during those live streams, things like that. They're very aware of what type of game it is and kind of the fan base. And there's the old expression if you try and make a game for everyone, you're gonna end up making a game for no one.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and there's plenty of space out there for a lot of you know games that don't have any fan service. I mean, you look at something like Limbus Company or something
Mhm.
like that, or you look at probably Path to Nowhere, which probably has a little bit, but nothing near the extremes of fan servicey characters that you get in a Brown Dust 2 or the cutscenes that Brown Dust 2. Um, and so having that on the market and having an available space for that, I think is perfectly fine for people that are going to it for that.
Mhm.
And same thing with Snowbreak too. I think them to me the most based thing they did was to kind of subvert the censorship issues that they were dealing with certain stores or Google Play stores, or maybe it derived from government. I don't remember which.
Mhm.
But basically, quote unquote, leaking a way to go into the files and change one line of code so that it undoes all the censorship that they had to put in place. Like to me, that is pandering in the best way. Like you're like, we're here for our players. We're gonna do what our players want in this regard, and by saying government be damned or
Mhm.
big corporate Google or whatever it was, again, whatever the main source of the censorship was, those be damned. We're going to do it. Our players want this. We're going to accidentally leak this. And then the player base rewarded them for that because
Mhm.
I believe sales and numbers have gone up with those. I haven't looked at the most recent numbers for them and compared them, but there was an uptick because if we remember Snowbreak pre, and I know I'm rambling on and touching on a lot of different points. I wanted to throw it back to you in a minute, but I want to make this last point. For Snowbreak, if we remember, the reason they made this decision is it was going under. Like this
Mhm.
project was not going to last very much longer. It was essentially on life support. Like they were cutting costs where they could, which included no more English voice actors. So they were only doing like maybe Chinese and Japanese dubs, and that was it. Um, they had done something in the story that the players didn't write, so they went back and changed the main story. Like they retconned essentially a lot of the first chapters of the story and kind of rewrote the story to appease the player base. And while I think that maybe could be a step too far, because essentially it's your story to tell. You tell your story, and however people perceive it is however people receive it. Uh, that those are the things that they did, and that just kind of puts it in perspective about where they were and where they've come to now. I think I think they're above water with the project. I think it's going in the right place, and they're making sure because of those events that did occur that upset the player base, never want to go back and experience that again. So I'll toss to you kind of on that note. If you have any thoughts to expand on that or anything else uh, that maybe I did.
No, no, no. I mean, you covered a lot, so I've got a little bit
I know I hate a
to
lot of bullet points, so I'll give you the
yeah.
floor and kind of shut up for a minute. I'll try not
So
to interject. No problem.
you're good. So as far as Snowbreak goes, I feel like they are a good example of both the pros and the cons of, you know, quote unquote pandering here, where they made it very clear that, we're changing direction. This is what we're going to be now. This is their new identity. And, they committed to it. And I will give them credit for that. And it worked for them. I'm also very happy for them. I'm glad that their project was able to get above water. At the same time, beholden it made them beholden to their players in a way that I think even they weren't 100% cognizant of until it came back and bit them in the rear. Um, During, I want to say, I can't remember the event. It was actually the event that it made me end up quitting the game. Was when they walked back a storyline or story event. They actually shut down the event because I think a character mentioned some other, like a male character's name or something like that. I'm going to be 100% honest. I wasn't fully invested in the controversy. I was more annoyed that they just shut down the event and didn't stick to their guns on that one. I know why they did. They were getting upset customers. They were having to deal with, threats, people dropping the game, so on and so forth. So they made the changes they had to do to remain solvent, but I wasn't really interested in the direction that they were hard committing the game to. That if they were willing to pull the plug on an event over what, at least as far as I saw, was an overreaction to a character mentioning a male existing in a world. I don't know. That was a line in the sand too far for me. Um, and unfortunately, in a lot of cases, because of who and what they're pandering to, they run into these. I'm going to refer to them, I guess, as cultural landmines. Of if they're not exactly meeting the fantasy of their player base, it blows up in their face a little bit. Now they recovered. My understanding is again that they're solvent. They're doing well now. It doesn't sound like they're having any issues at the moment, but that transition did come with some, for lack of a better term, artistic cost. They had to basically give up some of the control that they had over their own game, over their own storytelling. I do think that it was interesting you mentioned Limbus Company, because Limbus Company had, to my knowledge, still has a fairly strict no fan service rule in their game, that they have stuck to, even in the face of players basically getting upset at them that they had a summer event and they didn't have a sexy skin for one of the characters, and they took a lot of heat for that. And I will commend them for basically going, look, this is the game that we are making. This is what you agreed to when you picked it up. If you don't like it, the door's over there, but we're not going to change because you don't like the fact that our summer skins are not risque enough for you. So I don't play Limbus Company because I don't like the gameplay, but I will give them credit that they at least they stuck to their guns on that one. They were willing to take the risk, and I commend them for that. And yeah, I agree that there is a place in the market for fan servicey games, and I guess here we'll jump over to what was going to be my second tangent, but you kind of laid out a lot of the points that I wanted to speak on. Is we're both we both grew up on '90s anime for the most part, Dragon Ball Z and older type stuff. I believe, Dave. Yeah.
Accurate. Yeah.
Okay.
Dragon Ball Z, that gateway anime into
Yeah.
what eventually was what Adult Swim, when that actually showed anime. So like
Yeah.
Outlaw Star,
Outlaw Star,
Bebop,
Trigun, Cowboy Bebop. Yep, exactly.
Gundam Winged, just like that.
Yeah. So, one of the things that, as a longtime anime fan, I guess technically otaku, I don't like using the word because it's just a loan word. But anyways, we're not getting into that. Um, as a longtime anime fan, one of the things that I've noticed with the industry is that there is some degree of survivorship bias, where like not every anime from the 80s and 90s was Cowboy Bebop, was Outlaw Star, were those big classics. And those are the ones that managed to make it through. There was a lot of slop in there too. But I think the nature of the quote unquote slop anime, the bottom of the barrel stuff, has changed quite a bit, in that I feel like post, really in the 2000s, the aughts, when that was during those years, there was a shift in the way the anime industry worked. And I know I'm talking about a completely other subject, but I promise I'm going to tie this back. Where we started seeing a lot more cute girls doing cute shows. There was a lot more focus on on fan service. It wasn't that fan service didn't exist before. Again, we've all watched Outlaw Star. We know fan service exists. But there was a larger focus on fan service, on pandering to the Japanese otaku market, because they were the ones that spent the money. They were the ones that went out and bought all of the DVDs. They bought the statues. They made the licensing rights valuable. So that was what the producers and the studios really started focusing on. And they moved away from the more broad, general appeal stories that, while profitable, they weren't bringing in the same money as these other ones. And long story short, that's my concern, that eventually the gacha market is going to get warped in that direction, because it's already a niche market. Genshin brought in a lot of lifeblood to the market, and they showed that a general audience could have an interest in gacha games, but for a long time they've been very niche, and they've had to do whatever they could in order to make their projects work. And that fan service, and especially the pandering in order to make ends meet, in a lot of ways, it's very much so becoming part of the gotcha genre subculture. I think, I think that you do need to give your customers what they want, but I'm concerned that that sort of that they're giving us sugar and they're not giving us anything of actual substance. That they're going to focus on, hey, if we just put more sugar in it, they'll they'll like it regardless, instead of giving us the meat and potatoes that make these games good. I guess would be my concern. And I know I've kind of probably stumbled there a little bit, but yeah. What do you think, Dave?
I like that. And you bring up, I think, a good point in terms of like survivor bias and everything like that, in terms of what we remember from anime in the 90s and what stood out versus everything that was created. And I immediately equated this to debates I have with my dad all the time, to make another analogy to kind of an example of this in music, in the music industry. Because, you talk about classic rock and you have things for him that's like, oh, these all Eagles, the Beatles, AC/DC, like all these old classic groups and classic songs. It was like, oh, this is so much better than today's music, because I'll play things that I grew up on or things that I enjoyed. So, something like maybe Linkin Park, like right now, kind
Well,
of going through like Sleep Token, Bad
yeah.
Omen, stuff like that. But
As a
but he,
quick example, sorry, just to cut in, the song "Disco Duck" was uh, the top number one hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976. Does anyone know what Disco Duck is? Have you even heard of that song? Continue.
yeah, I was like, what? But to have an example of survivor's bias and whatnot, it's like I'm sitting here going, it's like, no, it's not that all the music today is worse than it was in the 70s and 80s. And again, this is me growing up. I understand
Mhm.
we're in the 2020s now. And it's like me having the conversation with a teenager today about whatever's popular at current time. Like Imagine Dragons or something like that. It's like it's not had the test of time, because in order to weed through to get to those classics of the Beatles, the Eagles,
Mhm.
and AC/DC, like all those bands, right, that have huge hits from that time period, you have to let time weed out all the other ones that weren't as good, or maybe like just the one hit wonders or something like that. Similar to like now we are actually starting to see a band like Linkin Park, pretty timeless. The Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Foo Fighters, right? All those we would maybe be considering classics today because of when they came out, right? God, aging ourselves, geez. Um, but all the other music that maybe came out in the early aughts that didn't stand the test of time has faded away. So that's just kind of another example of your survivor's bias, to make another analogy. And that's what you
Mm.
made me think. I know that was a tangent that didn't have anything to do with the discussion, but I just wanted to give
Well,
another example for maybe those that aren't anime fans and are like, well, what do you mean by this? So yeah, if you've ever had a musical discussion with your parent about how their music is better than our music today, um, well, that's why. It's because all their crappy artists and music that weren't big hits has faded away into obscurity, and we are currently having to live through those bands that are ultimately going to fade away into obscurity until we get what will become the classics,
mhm.
as I mentioned with like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Linkin Park, Foo Fighters, etc. Um, but as far as like to go back to the pandering statement, yeah, I think like you said, Snowbreak did some good, and then like I said, going a step too far. When you mentioned that event, I had forgotten about it until you said it. But yeah, there was that whole drama where, yeah, like you said, they completely cut off and stopped the event and gave out some compensation or whatever for it. But I think that might have been a step too far in terms of the pandering, because now you are catering to the, I don't know, I think for lack of a better descriptor, I think it was essentially the NTR type group. Um, and so by catering to that and giving them that power, now you are beholden to anything that you do that they don't enjoy, and they're going to risk throwing off and striking. It's kind of like the antithesis of what Limbus Company did. They said, no, these are our characters. This is the story we're creating. This is the characters and the personalities that they are. If you don't like it, too bad. This is the story we're telling. This is the depiction of these characters. And so I completely agree with what you're saying on that. And so, like I said, with pandering, there was a good side with what Snowbreak did, and then there's a too far type thing as well. And for me, like Brown Dust 2, I don't think they've crossed the threshold into a too far thing. I think they're comfortable in what they're doing, and they know what they're doing. And what was also even interesting too, because I think there was because in the original Brown Dust there were gender bent costumes, so there were male characters that had
Yeah,
female
gender print
skins.
versions. Yeah.
And when they were asked about that during the live stream about that potentially, would you bring over a gender bent version of a character? I think they said no to that moving forward. So they're just like completely female characters only now moving. And then they're really leaning into that. And I think the game, especially now with the introduction of the the diner, essentially
Hmm.
the self insert diner story mode,
Yeah.
where you're running a diner and various characters come in there and you talk to them and have stories. Like I think that is kind of they have to be careful with how those stories go because that leans into kind of that NTR niche. Because the Brown Dust story in and of itself is there's no self insert. It's just here are the characters. You're not even self insert. It's just these are
Yeah.
the characters, and you're observing it. So they do need to be a little careful with that. Another thing that I wanted to mention too, I didn't know if you had seen in terms of pandering or games that pander, in terms of fan service. I think one of the most well-known games in terms of fan service would be Azure Lane,
Hmm.
and our ship foos and our ship girls, right? So the play style for Azure Lane is a bullet hell game. It is very minimal involvement in terms of you can just put it on auto and do like probably 99% of the content. It's basically you're collecting all the different ship girls. That's the draw of the game, and where they make their money is on the skins and selling the skins and the live 2D animations that have gotten more and more extravagant as time's gone on in that game. There's sometimes you got to look up a tutorial sometimes on some of these skins in terms of how to get all the like customizations, reaction things or whatever.
Hmm.
Anyway, but my point in bringing up Azure Lane is it's always kind of been that fan servicey game that's playing like that plays to the fan base in terms of knowing who their audience is, in terms of like also like their interactions on like social posts and intern coon and stuff that they talk about, and like again just acknowledging
Yeah.
who they are. But I was surprised because this week or maybe it was last week I saw that the Google Play Store finally they changed the age rating from 12 plus to 17 plus on the global store, and that was surprising to me that it hadn't already been 17 plus because some
Hmm.
of these skins are pretty risque, especially when you um again throw in the interactions that come with some of the live 2D skins, because some of those live 2D skins they even had to remove from the game because of some Apple Store policies or Google Store policies in the past. So I wonder if now this changed, if they're going to re-implement some of those skins and interactions that they took out, and what that means for things moving forward. And then you contrast that with a game like Wuthering Waves, which I think actually which didn't change their store rating, but they did censor some skins because obviously as you go from like a plus 12 to a plus 17, or maybe in other regions that would be like a teen to a Peggy 18 or something like that,
Yeah.
you're reducing the audience that's going to be able to play the game, and therefore you're reducing your potential revenue from spenders. And again, this is I'm casting the ethical discussion aside of, well, what do you mean? Because then that means little kids are spending
Yeah.
money on a gambling gadget. Like I'm throwing that's out the window. It's just taking the industry for what it is at face value. By reducing to a 17 plus audience, you are taking out those, you know, I'll say 10 to 16 year olds, right, who would potentially have some birthday money or Christmas money or some type
Or
of income
parent
to spend.
approval to spend.
Parent approval, air quote, parent approval to spend on a game, right? So I'll be interested because that is so recent. I don't have any like data as far as like here's what the numbers are doing. Like it's had this type of impact. I will be interested to see how that affects it moving forward. But do you have any thoughts on that? Like
Um,
store ratings changes and those that have done it versus those that maybe haven't?
as far as I'm concerned, the store rating changes I'm fine with because at least they're being honest. They're not trying to like they're being open about, look, this is what the game is. It's we are aiming for an older audience. We're showing I don't want to quite say adult content, but we are, you know, more mature content will be in the game. That's what you're signing up for. Like that's as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. You know, if you want to release or if they want to update their game from 12 to 16 plus, 17 plus, whatever the various ratings are, you know, as far as I'm concerned, great, cool. You know, that's the business decision that they are making. I would rather that they do that than try and pull a for a lack. I respect what Azure Lane did a little bit more than what Wuwa did, Wuthering Waves did. That, you know, if that's the type of content you want to make, then just be honest about it. Don't pull the like, oh no, we accidentally crossed the line. Okay, I guess we're gonna have to censor it back. Like, if that's what you wanted to do, if that was what you were setting out to do, don't pull this toe the line thing where you're gonna walk right up to the edge and continually sit on the edge and be like, oh, maybe, ooh, we're being real saucy today, and it's like, no, don't don't do
Yeah,
that.
I think I guess in conclusion, I guess to wrap it up, as far as this discussion, I think we would ultimately, I guess both, it sounds like, agree that in terms of pandering, you know, there's definitely a good way to go about it, and from a fan service perspective, those that have opted into that route have done it for the most part. I think with these couple of examples, done it pretty well. Um, and then we also then both agree there's also a too far or a wrong way to kind of go about it, and that's, I think, when it comes to you change your artistic view on maybe the story or the characters in terms of their personalities or how you write the characters.
Yeah, and
And I think when you have to stifle that, I think that's going too far. And I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you maybe kind of agree with that sentiment.
yeah, I
But
agree that there's
any thoughts or any disagreements on my interpretation?
no, you're good. Yeah, I think that there is a too far. I would say the other direction or the other concern, and we didn't quite talk about this, is the, as I mentioned, replacing the meat and vegetables with sugar, where they're leaning on fan service, they're leaning on whatever form of pandering they're choosing to to use for their game as a crutch to make up for the fact that they're basically shovelware, or that there's really nothing there at the center of the game. It's just there to sell you whatever it is that they're trying to pander towards. And I guess there might be a future H game episode one day, maybe if we ever break, 1,000 subscribers. That's the line
Yeah,
in
is
the
that you're
sand.
setting it right
That
here
that's
on
the
this episode?
line in
We
the
break
sand. This
1K
episode,
subscribers.
one
We're
K.
doing some research on H gotchas.
Yeah, I will sit down. We will have the most uncomfortable research sessions that we've ever had as we work it out, and we will talk about H gotchas. Because whatever. Anyways,
This is breaking news,
yeah,
folks. This was not a pre-discussed thing
this
here.
was
This
not.
is
This
breaking
was
news.
unilateral. The unilateral decision
Okay.
by me. That we break 1,000K subscribers or 1K subscribers. We'll do the H game episode that I'm sure everybody wants to hear two guys talk about. Uh,
I will consent and agree to your terms. If I don't think I had a choice, but I will agree to them. I'll be here for that. That'll be a great, fun conversation.
oh yeah.
Um, all right. Well, I yeah, I didn't touch too much on that. But I think, I'll do a quick response to this, and then I know we have some events and a bunch of
Yeah.
other we have character reviews and a bunch of other news with anniversaries and stuff to talk about. But I think that games that are too much sugar and not enough meat and potatoes, um, I think we find them shutting down. I think those play themselves to EOS pretty quickly, because I think even the developers in those know, hey, this is just a quick money cash grab. We're not sticking around for a long time. We're just, how much can we get quick? And that's when we see games that are reusing assets but rebranded as different names. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's like
Well, they
5 or 6 versions of one game on the Apple Store, and it's all the same assets, the same publisher. It's just they've been rebranded, and then it's the stereotypical idle combat,
yeah, pump and dump
multiple
type.
servers,
Yeah.
BS. Yeah. So I think games that are too much sugar play themselves out. I don't think that's as big of a concern as I would have as like we would have with Anime per se. So that's my quick response.
Sounds good.
All right. So like I said, moving on, we do have new character reviews with Vivian and ZZZ. But first, Steve, I'll throw it over to you for the events.
Okay, so as far as events go, we've got one event for each of the Hoyoverse games. The first for Honkai Star Rail. As part of the anniversary, planar fissures are up 300%, or you get triple rewards for your planar fissure searches or planar fissure runs. You have 12 total uses of that, and it's good for the entire next, should be about a week, I believe, by the time this goes live. So there should be about a week left on that going into it. Um, then for Genshin Impact, we have Quirky Quaking Arena, another event that Genshin has been doing. Minigame Impact is back in full force, so that is going on in Genshin. And then the final event that we've got is Say It With Flowers for Zenless Zone Zero. That's going to be one of the longer 40-day events that we were getting at the beginning of the patch here. So, feel free to take your time with it, enjoy it. It's looking like it'll be a little bit of fun. I haven't had a chance to try it myself, but as a reminder, it started up. So those are the three events going on in Hoyoverse games.
And before I segue from the ZZZ events to the ZZZ new character, I want to have a small event session, and hopefully other people can share in my pain. The planar ornaments being up 300%. I used 10 of the 12 runs the other day in
Mm-hmm.
a portal where both sets were relevant to upgrading characters, and I got one rollable artifact. I was the artifact hell grind is
Mm-hmm.
real.
Hey, I had 180 of particular set that I'm looking to grind for, and out of all of those, I had one rope that was usable. Everything else wasn't worth my time.
I can't tell you the number of ropes that I got that were defense main stat, speed, crit, or something or
Yeah,
some combo like that where it's like substat, mwah, chef's kiss, main stat, track.
not even worth
I
using.
mean, I or it was the other set. Like it's the set that I actually needed those stats on should have been on the other set. This one needed to be the defensive stats. And I just frustrating. Anyway, character reviews. Let's
Yes.
go back. Let's go back to character review. A lighter note, a fun, happy new characters. Yay! So ZZZ, say it with flowers, right? And kind of a flowery theme. Vivian, is the new. She is an ether attribute character in the anomaly specialty, and then she's also, if you are keeping track, part of the Mockingbird faction. So, because sometimes faction bonuses apply in ZZZ, but she's a nice looking character. I do like the purple aesthetic, parasol, the fancy like gentlewoman type um, appeal that she has, and the combat actually kind of looks pretty cool because I think the parasol trope and like then them hovering in the air with the parasol being open is a tried and true adorable trope. But as far as Vivian goes, in terms of build, so we're going to talk a little bit first about the W engines or her weapons to use. Obviously, again, signature weapon, of course, always going to be the best option for characters. But if you're like me and you're low on econ and just trying to build a roster and not focused on W engines, some other options are going to be the Weeping Gemini would be the next best option for her. If you do have that, that is a 4-star, or I guess in ZZZ terms, an A rank W engine. If you don't have Weeping Gemini, Electro Lip Gloss would be another option. Rainforest Gourmet would be another option in terms of the A rank alternatives. Other 5-star alternatives would include Time Weaver or Fusion Compiler. For the best disk drive sets for her, or these are the equivalent of artifacts if we're using Genshin terminology, Phaethion's Melody, the 4-piece set, going to be the best option for her there. And then, as a reminder, in Zenless Zone Zero, there are 6 slots. So you'll get the 4-piece for Phaethion's Melody, and then use a two-piece bonus from maybe Chaos Jazz, Freedom Blues, uh, Chaotic Metal would be an alternative option, Astral Voice, Hormone Punk, or Puffer Electro, kind of in that order in terms of prioritization. For the item, for the excuse me, for the stats on the pieces, in Zenless Zone Zero, again, just to establish this, discs 4, 5, and 6 are the ones that have different main stats, whereas discs 1, 2, 3 are static, always the same main stats on them. So in terms of discs 4, 5, and 6, for disc 4, anomaly proficiency is going to be what we want the main stat to be. Disc 5, ether damage or ether damage is going to be the priority, but also acceptable would be a pen ratio disc or attack percentage disc. And then for a disc 6 main stat, again, anomaly mastery would probably be the best option, but attack percentage would also be acceptable. For substats, we're going to focus on anomaly proficiency, attack percentage, followed by flat attack or penetration. Right, so those are going to be the substats we're looking for there. And then as far as some teams and synergies, so there are a few different team combinations that have been posted and are kind of theorized. In terms of her best team, you're looking at something like maybe Miyabi, Jane Doe, Yanagi with Vivian, and then Astra Yao. Or maybe if you don't have Astra Yao, other supports could include Nicole or Lucy. If you're running like a triple anomaly team, somebody like Jane Doe, Yanagi, Vivian with Bernice. If you're, again, kind of poor on your econ like I am, maybe a free-to-play team example would be somebody like Piper, Vivian, and Lucy in there as the support. Bang Boot options would be looking at Robin, not to be confused with Robin from Honkai Star Rail, for the extra Ether Anomaly buildup. If you don't have Robin, Snap or Lucky Boo would also be acceptable. Lucky Boo more if you're using Jane Doe teams. But that's going to be Vivian in a nutshell. So that's going to be our character review for the week. Now moving over to our gotchas, other gotcha news rather. A lot of anniversaries going on right now. A lot of anniversary announcements or anniversaries that are happening. And so covering a couple games that we don't that I don't have in my rotation, but still on the radar. Slime Isekai Memories, their 3.5-year anniversary is going on through May 30th. And for this one, this one stood out to me because over the course of this anniversary, 550 polls from logging in. So I would imagine this is a dupe heavy game. I don't actually play it, so I don't know. Maybe somebody can help me out as far as how many dupes do you need. Because 550 polls definitely sounds like you need some dupes to make a character good to go. But anyway, that's Slime Isekai Memories. Again, 3.5-year anniversary running through May 30th. We also have Solo Leveling Arise is going to be celebrating its first anniversary coming up on May 8th. So if you like that IP or you are playing that game and wanting to get back into it, or maybe it's in your daily rotation, or again, maybe you like the IP and you're wanting to try out a new game, anniversary would be a good time to start, again, starting May 8th. Brown Dust 2, not currently having an anniversary, but did announce here a new event with a new character, another Morpheus skin, who's a water element type, who's got a unique kind of ability of summoning, summoning summons, for lack of a better word, to kind of help out and tank and taunt enemies. But also Brown Dust 2, I think they teased that they have a collaboration coming up. I don't believe it's been announced who it is, so we will keep you posted on that. Interested to see who they collab with next. The last piece of news today is going to be probably my biggest or longest news here for a breakdown, and that is going to be Nikke, Goddess of Victory, having their 2.5-year anniversary. I mentioned last week that the live stream occurred, and then the patch actually went live here this last week. So for Nikke, with the 2.5 anniversary, we're going to be getting a free SSR unit, Mori. So that's available just from logging in for the very first time. Also with that, you'll get 10 free limited pulls from that same reward bundle. I think the math ultimately adds up to, over the course of the event, we're going to get about 130 or 140 free pulls. Whether that be from tickets they give us, there will be a daily free pull on each banner. So right now the banner unit going up is the Pilgrim unit Siren. So she is available currently with a free pull, one pull each day on top of the free tickets we're going to get over the course of the anniversary event, which again is going to come out to about 130, 140 tickets, with bulk of those being on the limited banner as opposed to the standard banner. I think like maybe 20, 30 of them are standard banner pulls. I don't remember the exact breakdown, but that's what's going on there. So again, new character Siren. Also with the 2.5 anniversary comes a new battle pass with the event, which is going to be also, if you do purchase the battle pass, you're going to get, upon completing the battle pass, a skin for Grave, who is one of the Pilgrim Burst 2 units that came back out a few patch cycles ago. They've also introduced a new skin for Siren, who again is the new character. This skin will be a gotcha skin, which means it's going to come with its own unique summon animation. And if you are interested in this, be prepared to pay up to $50 because you're most likely not going to get it in one of the earlier polls. You'll probably get it on the later poll, is what the numbers would suggest. But like the typical gotcha summons, they are giving out some free currency. Normally they give you one pull for free. With the anniversary, they're technically giving you, I think, 3 or 4 pulls for free, which still means you would have to spend money in order to have a chance to pull the skin, because it can't even get the skin till the 5th pull, which is, we've discussed that in the past, not the best in terms of player reception. But just to let you know, rather than spending the normal $60 when they don't give out free currency, you would probably only have to spend $50. So if you're interested in that, that's there. And then we know what's coming down the path in the second half of the event will be another new character, Mihara, who is going to be this new overspec type character. They introduced this with Red Hood Rappy. So Mihara already exists in the game as an SR unit. This new skin is going to be an SSR variation. And then there will also be a gotcha custom skin for her. So another $50 if you're wanting to do that for her. And then they'll do another battle pass, which will include a skin for Cinderella. So the event itself includes its own traversable map that you can explore and look for goodies, as well as like new story, new mini games, which is kind of like a if you remember the old what was the old gotcha game? Valkyrie Chronicles. I think it was a row battler, so you put units on, they go across to try and attack the other person's castle and will engage anybody that's coming at them type thing. But it's a similar mini game to that. So a lot going on with Nikke in their 2.5 anniversary, so this will be running for the next couple of weeks. Do bear in mind, just if you are a Nikke player, that with Nikke, we have the 2.5 anniversary now, a lot of fun things going on there. But right around the corner, we are going to have, of course, their typical summer event, which is usually also a pretty big event. And also, they are going to be doing I guess it's technically a collab, but it's kind of an in-house collab with Stellar Blade, which Shift Up also created. That was the AAA game that came out back last year on the PlayStation, which was, I think, a pretty big success for them. But they are going to be doing a collaboration with Stellar Blade, so I imagine that means bringing Eve into Nikke. So if you do like the IP there, it's going to be a very busy next couple of patch cycles for Nikke in terms of pull economy, if you're a free-to-play player. So that's going to do it for us this week, though. We want to thank you guys for joining us. Let us know down below your thoughts on pandering players in gotcha games and maybe what is a step too far. If you did enjoy the episode and you'd like to show your support for the show, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. And as we established with breaking news this episode, if we get to 1,000 followers, we will do research on gotcha. So help us have that awkward and fun conversation. Get the word out there and help us get to 1,000 subscribers. You can always, of course, email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. We have the link to the Discord in the description down below, so you can join us over there for news, game night, and content notifications. Join us next week when Steve and I bring back and play another round of Swipe, Save, or Skip, featuring Genshin Impact's 2.0 character run. But until then, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.